Welcome back. Here's an email from Joseph who says, I have two complaints about the media's coverage of health care reform. Number one, Obamacare is a derisive term coined by Republicans to refer to health care reform legislation, and yet yesterday, blaring across an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, Naftali, was Obamacare.
Well, look,
no, I'm not blaming you. All I'm saying is I think that it's not just the reporters, it's not just the columnists, it is the headline writers as well, who are all part of the media. He goes on to say the media have consistently underreported legal proceedings in favor of the validity of the health care reform legislation, namely some 16 to 18 suits contesting the bill have been dismissed outright. Number two, exactly the same number of federal judges have ruled the law valid as invalid.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I think we probably should have done a better job of that. I think the reason for that is it was widely expected to be upheld, and it's sort of less of a surprising or unusual development when a court upholds a law than when it strikes down a major piece of legislation that Congress has been working on for 2 years. I do think, though, that the writer touches on something kind of interesting, which is that the two judges that upheld the law were both Democratic appointees. The two judges that struck down the law were Republican appointees. And it's sort of widely expected, maybe wrongly, but that when it gets to the Supreme Court, we all know how the four liberals are going to vote. We know how the four conservatives are going to vote. It's going to come down to one guy, Justice Anthony Kennedy, and whatever he thinks, that's going to be the law of the land. And I think it's unfortunate that there's this perception increasingly of the judiciary that it's basically one more legislature, that there's Democrats, there's Republicans, they all rule in favor of the policies of their parties, and that's what determines the outcome. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but certainly that's a growing perception, and it's too bad because that's not what judges are supposed to be.
So, and if the Supreme Court then decides that some parts of the law may live and others must die, does it become Anthony Care? Because we all know that it's going to be up to Anthony Kennedy to break that logjam if, in fact, it does devolve to that. And I do think it's unfortunate, and I think among the people who don't like it are the members of the Supreme Court. They would very much like to come up with a way to resolve this case that was not 5-4 or 4-5. That would be much more to their liking. They do not like the comparison to Bush v. Gore, which will surely be made, and they did not like the way the court was characterized by that particular decision. The other thing about those dismissals, and there have been quite a number, there was one yesterday in Mississippi by a very Republican judge, and that they are mostly based on standing. Mostly those cases have been dismissed because the judges have found that the people who were bringing the suit did not have proper standing to bring the suit.
And what does that mean?
Well,
who were they?
It doesn't go to the issue, for example, of the Commerce Clause. It doesn't go to some of the most essential issues that are raised by the law and in these controversial decisions from Florida and Virginia.
All right, to Louisville, Kentucky. Hi, Deb.
Hello.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I'm just, all the talk about constitutionality and all that kind of stuff is good. I'm just amazed that we've just gotten used to this. You know, I haven't had insurance or been to a doctor for 5 years because I live on grants, working in jails and prisons. But the other day I was driving, stopped to help a woman in distress. Turns out her boyfriend had a seizure, or mother of her child actually, had a seizure while he was driving. She'd managed to get the car over to the road. The ambulance was coming. He was turning blue. And in talking to her, calming her down, it found out he just hadn't been able to afford the medicine to keep the seizures from happening. I don't know if he made it, didn't make it, but it's just sad that in this country we've just gotten used to the fact that some people are just going to die because they can't afford simple things like seizure medicine.
Deb, that is such a powerful story, and I think Deb's right. There are an awful lot of people out there who cannot afford to go to the doctor. I talked with someone who I know the other day, and I asked her whether she had health insurance, and she said, no, I can't afford it. And she said that when she gets sick, she goes to the emergency room. And that's what people continue to do. Now comes the other part. You and I pay for each and every penny of that because the hospitals pass those costs on, Ron.
That's right. The system has to provide some kind of payment for the services that are rendered, and that gets distributed to all the people who do pay when they use the hospital, or it gets borne by some governmental entity, and we all pay for that through our taxes, whether it be at the local, state, or federal level. So by some estimates, more than 50% of the total health care budget of this country, if you will, the entire economy of health care in this country, is already, in some sense or another, government-borne and thereby taxpayer-borne. It's a question of how we're going to organize it and distribute it.